Christ, what the fuck is that thing? Oh, wait, that's, that's Edward. This is the real horror, though.
It's you?
You know what? I give the fuck up. I just don't see it. Wait, hang on. Wait a second. Holy shit. It might surprise a fair few people to discover that the formula for survival horror wasn't invented by Resident Evil. I mean, don't get me wrong, the idea of horror in video games has been around since video games existed. But we're talking specifically 3D horror. The tank controls, the stiff combat, the inventory management, the struggle to even survive. And while it was made popular by Resident Evil, it was by no means the first of its kind. For that, we'd need to go back a couple of years, specifically to 1992, with the release of a small DOS game called Alone in the Dark. Oh yeah, this is where it began. All those annoying, frustrating little tidbits that you get in horror games, the idea of jump scares, the idea of stiff controls, the idea of inventory management, it all began here. So here we are, a little retrospective. Let's take a look at that story, let's take a look at the mechanics, and let's take a look at its lasting appeal. And let's find out if it holds up today. Spoiler, it kinda doesn't. Anyway, let's dive right in. Narratively, the game is quite simple. You are given the choice at first to play as one of two protagonists, either Edward Carnby or Emily Hartwood. Canonically, it's Edward Carnby that fills the role here, and so naturally that's what I went with. Both are visiting the DeSito mansion for varying reasons, but the overall purpose is to discover why the owner of the mansion, Jeremy Hartwood, committed suicide. A dark theme to open your game with. Like most survival horror games that you would experience today, the story is told primarily through books, letters, and little hints that you find throughout the mansion. I think this is a good time to bring up the voice acting because it's actually pretty good. I mean, just listen to Carnby's entire narration before you start the game.
On my door, a dull brass plate says, Private Detective. The few friends I have call me Carnby. The others call me the Reptile. I don't care to think what my banker calls me. These days, I leave my letters unopened. Bills and threats to send in the receivers just ruin my day.
This was in 1992, before Metal Gear Solid decided to set the bar for cinematics in video games.
I wasn't able to read the future. A strong man doesn't need to read the future. He makes his own.
Even the way the books are narrated or the letters are read out are incredibly well done, sounding natural, real almost. The characters themselves as a result sound a bit more believable compared to the other voice acting that we've seen in horror games. Need I remind you of...
What is this? Wow, what a mansion!
Back to the attic section, you're given a bit of free reign to figure out the controls, to figure out how you interact with everything in the game. This doesn't last long, however, as the game decides to show you that it's not fucking around. Okay, look, I get it. That demon doesn't necessarily look very intimidating. Hell, I don't even know what it is. I mean, look at some of the other demons out here. They look like they stepped out of Looney Tunes. Looking back, I don't exactly know what I found scary about this when I was playing as a kid. Revisiting it now, I feel like I should just slap myself across the face for ever thinking any of this was scary. Well, the demons at least. This first section serves to show you exactly how you can interact with your environment, how to fight, and how to do everything you need to do in the game. It seems a little obtuse to start, but if you pay attention, you can actually figure out what to do right from the get-go. If you pay attention to Emily Hartwood's monologue, she mentions that the loft window was blocked with the wardrobe, alerting you that it can in fact be moved. The other more subtle hint that let me know what to do was actually to do with color coding. There's this stool that's textured the same as the chest and as the wardrobe. It can be moved by you just walking into it. You don't have to activate any additional controls in order to make this happen. But the fact that it can move and that it's colored the same way as the other two objects that can be moved within the environment lets you know that they too can be moved. And with a little experimentation and taking a look at the controls, you finally figure out what to do here. It also makes a point to introduce you to the combat, which is a little comedic actually. You got Edward or you got Emily with their fisticuffs out and they're ready to beat down on some zombies or some demons, attacking them with their bare hands, kicking them in the face or in the chest. I mean, doesn't that kind of make them the bravest protagonists ever? I especially like Emily's attacks because she actually aims for the nuts when she kicks. Here you also find your first long-ranged weapon, which is the rifle. And while powerful, it's slow. Really, really slow. Just like every other firearm in this game. The fixed camera angles don't lend itself very well to the whole lining up your shot aspect of things. Unlike other survival horror games, you actually have to manually align yourself in order to make the shot count, which is stiff, annoying, and less than ideal. The demons themselves are pretty easy to kill, but it's not really recommended that you use the guns to do so unless you're really in a bind. It's more of a desperation tactic if anything else. Anyway, after this section, you're able to explore the rest of the mansion. You discover various books, various letters that indicate what went on here. Jeremy having kept record of everything that happened, having been driven completely insane by what was going on.
A curse is on their citadel, from the foundations to the very rooftop. I can no longer struggle, let alone eradicate the evil that grips the house. The end is very near, I can feel it. I have taken the decision to... May he who finds this diary pray for my soul.
The puzzle solving here is akin to anything you'd find in any other survival horror game. Mostly, doors are locked. Mostly, you have to gather items in order to open these doors. Mostly, these items are strange and they have different effects on your environment. And more often than not, the items themselves are a little obtuse in their usage. Take the jug for example. I mean, at first when I looked at this, I had no idea what to do with it. But I mean, you see water later on and you know that you have to fill it up and then you have to figure out where to use it, which in this case is the ashtray, which brings into focus the other aspect of survival horror, inventory management. You need to keep an eye on what you're using and what you keep because at some point you won't be able to carry any more. For example, the health items. Usually they leave behind an empty version of themselves and therefore they take up inventory space. You don't want to keep these and so you have to throw them. But then you also tend to think this about other items that are either empty or broken, such as the saber, and so you kind of end up throwing them without thinking twice. And this can kind of lead to some frustration when you realize you're meant to use them a little later on. Thankfully, they don't exactly dissolve out of existence and therefore can be picked up again at any time. And so one of the best ways to go about this is to leave all these items in a corner somewhere so that you can come back to them later on. Much like survival horror in general, combat is generally quite discouraged. But weirdly, this game is designed around that approach, almost as if the developers kind of understood that combat was a little tiresome in this game, stiff and not fit for purpose. I think the only section where it really forces you to fight is against a pirate. Yes, a pirate. You heard that right. A backflipping pirate, a gymnastic pirate, an Olympian pirate. Although to be fair, this duel is pretty fun, and it's pretty easy when you actually get the hang of it. Explore the mansion a bit more and you manage to find an underground passage. And here things get a little inconsistent. You must be wondering why. Well, the game decides that it's a good idea to now introduce platforming. Platforming in a fixed camera angle video game. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I didn't like it. I'm not even gonna... Just don't ask me. These entire sections were just frustrating to say the least. And another mechanic it decides to throw into the mix is the whole dark room stereotype. Limited lighting, and you have to navigate a maze. Frustrating. Frustrating. Absolutely frustrating. Power through and you finally manage to make it to the final area. It's rather easy here. It's not really like an epic boss fight or anything. You run towards the altar and you put the talisman down and you throw the lamp. After that, the underground starts to shake uncontrollably. You know what time it is? Escape time! There's no time limit or anything like that though, so you could actually just stroll on out of there without a problem. I mean, seriously, it's not like anything's chasing you or like the island's gonna go to crumble or, you know. You escape the mansion and, you know, Edward Carnby just sort of jumps in excitement. And you get one hell of a cliffhanger in the form of your driver being a skeleton. fucking knew I should have hired Ride. I realized just now that I haven't actually brought up the graphics, and so I shall talk about that now. The game's called Alone in the Dark, yet the game's pretty well lit. I recognize, however, that this is a limitation of the graphical engine from back then. DOS couldn't really do dark environments. The graphics themselves are entirely polygon-based, triangular in nature, sharp in the way that they're presented. And honestly, for early 1992, this isn't so bad. Sure, sometimes it's difficult to figure out what's what in your environment, but it's never impossible, and so they did the best with what they could do. Honestly, I kinda like the presentation of this game. The pre-rendered backgrounds are really, really good. That mansion shot at the start of the game alone is insanely detailed and incredibly ominous. You just kinda know you're in for a bad time. Some of the other little touches they put in the environment are pretty good too. For example, during the introduction sequence when you're walking up to the mansion, you get a look from the perspective of the window. And that, wow, that is intimidating. That looks like the kind of thing that should have appeared in this game. The kind of thing that would have scared you absolutely shitless. The soundtrack is a little basic by comparison. The groans of each monster are very unique, but it's the music that kind of suckers you out of it. The music sounds more or less like you're going through like a pirate film or like a action sequence, over a horrifying, more somber soundtrack to fit the mold of what they were going for. In all honesty, it's a bit of an immersion breaker and I wasn't really a fan of it. I feel like this, of all things, could have been done a lot better. Final notes, I mean, the game hasn't aged well. It's stiff, it's randomized, and none of the demons really stand out as scary. However, it's an important stepping stone in the world of survival horror. And every horror game that's come now that follows its system owes itself to it. And I think for that reason you should check it out. Give it a little try, if only to find out the roots of survival horror. I don't think you'll regret it.
Ludwig Prien. Nomine invocatoris, si non sanctificat.